Hello, my fellow presenters. Okay, so in this video, I wanted to talk about the one thing that I think we often underestimate when it comes to running our freelancer business, and that is the element of time. Often we might look at a fee for one day of work and say, oh, that's a really good fee, but we don't often factor in the other bits of time that go into it. For example, pitching for the job, applying for it, corresponding about what the requirements are, what they're looking for, what they need to make sure it's done right, whatever it is. Also, just the aftercare, the evaluation, the invoicing and things like that. And I wanted to share two instances which really kind of highlighted this. So the first applies to kind of an acting job. I say kind of because it was a very sort of limited brief, and I'll explain. So in this scenario, I often would do a lot of commercial self-tapes, and they can sometimes be the bane of my life because sometimes what they ask for, it's just, it really does take the biscuit, as they say. So it's literally, sometimes I would be asked to do scenes and scenes of things where you would much rather you're just seen for 5 minutes in a Zoom call and then that's it. You know, you're done and you can get on with your day. Often you're kind of setting up the camera, trying to work out how you're going to, you know, eat a tub of yogurt and then move into something else, and then show a full shot of you. And then if you're living on your own, like me as well, that also takes a lot of time as well. So you're just hoping that they'll just accept whatever it is that you can give them. Anyways, I digress, but hopefully you get the idea. So there was a job where it was a corporate video. It was a decent fee. I think it was somewhere between £600 to £700 for the day, but it was used sort of internally as a kind of health and safety training video. I won't say who the company is again, because it's not about that. I had a good experience with them. And I think the kind of procedure that they went through or things that they asked for is becoming quite typical. So because they are able to ask, they are going to ask. So it's not really about singling them out, but it's just about, I think, reflecting on it and putting that into perspective. So my agent had sent me this tape through to do for them. And it was like, there were some dialogue scenes in it, even though this particular tape booking didn't actually require me to have any dialogue. So I went and did the tape. I had to fill in somebody else's lines with the app because I just felt like for something that wasn't going to require dialogue, I didn't especially want to have to source somebody and so forth, because I was doing my other jobs, my quizzes and so forth. So I've done that tape, handed it in, and then I was told, great, you're being shortlisted. And then I had a Zoom audition. So that was kind of like another layer. So that I then auditioned. I then got it, thankfully, although I would have argued that they perhaps should have shortlisted a few applicants, auditioned them straight away on Zoom. I think it's great if you can audition people on Zoom. You can give people the option to come in. If they live further afield, you're making it quite accessible that they can just go on Zoom and do it. Anyway, so I've done it on Zoom, got it, brilliant. I was then asked that then there's going to be a meeting before this one day, and you might look at this one day, I mean, I think it was like £600 to £700. Actually, maybe it was like £550, but anyway, no, it was £600 to £700. Anyway, so I was told, okay, we need to have a meeting with you and the other cast members. So I've gone on there, and basically they said, oh, can you do 2-3 o'clock, something like that? And I was like, I can't really do that. It's right in the middle of the day. I'd have to come home and kind of sit on my laptop. It really kind of breaks my whole day up, and it's very difficult to take any other type of booking at that time and actually earn money. But they were like, oh, sorry, we can't do any other time. And I've sat through this meeting, and really, and this has happened before, even with bits of medical role play, which I'll talk about as another strand of things that you can do in your kind of freelance or portfolio career, if you like. And I remember thinking, I really don't need to be here. I appreciate that this is good for you because, i.e. the client, because you're kind of explaining how the day will run. So you feel at ease that you've kind of shared as much as you can. But I think really, unless you were going to pay for that meeting, which they didn't, and which is not normally commonplace, it should have all just been sent in a detailed document. Incidentally, all this video required was for me to kind of walk down the hallway and I see a health and safety hazard, a box in the way, and I just move it out the way as the kind of hero of that scene. That's all it was. And it's important, though, that it's great that the company does these kind of things, and I'm happy to be involved in these kind of projects, and I was certainly very grateful. But I think often it's missed that extra meeting as well, on top of having done the tape and having prepared for the audition. It was a lot, and essentially for a role which didn't, have any dialogue or anything like that. And obviously, I do them because I want to keep some kind of agent going in my career. I want to make it worth their while to have me as a freelancer. I think it's great that I can keep my hand in that. So I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. But equally, that's a challenge that happens. And also, when you do book a job, often people are like, yeah, I booked this, it was a good fee. But I think you have to look at that fee in light of all the other tapes that you've done. Sorry, but I feel like, when you're about to sneeze, it's not quite coming. And I'm feeling quite nasally. Anyway, but what I was saying is that you have to look at that fee in light of all the other tapes that you've done, all of the hours that you've put in, just everything, all of the meetings, all of those times that you were shortlisted and it didn't quite go through. Don't get me wrong, I understand sometimes, and this is obviously using the example of acting, there will be other disciplines, maybe theatre directing, maybe outside the creative industries, but this applies to freelancer work in general. Maybe you're a builder pitching for jobs, although I would probably presume it's less open to abuse than, say, the acting world is, because it's particularly very highly sought after. But yeah, you have to look at that in light of all of the other jobs that you've done, all of the other tapes that you've done, and the amount of hours and time that you've put in, and even all of the meetings you've had where you become so close to being shortlisted. And yes, some people will make the argument that sometimes you might meet a director on something that will see you and think, do you know what? You're not right for this, but you'd be great for another project, and it might be 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, 5 years. And so there is that kind of indirect benefit, but equally, sometimes it can come at a cost to something else. I remember there was a corporate job I was doing. It was decent pay, so I think something like 300, 350 for the day, and an actress had to pull out because she had a recall audition for a prestigious theatre company. I think it was the National, and so she just had to do it. And I get that, but that's the kind of cost that happens. And then obviously you worry about, are you going to get a booking again with that company? Do you worry about that keeping that rapport? And hopefully most good ethical companies will understand, because you are freelancers and they understand your whole situation, especially when it's very easy to find a replacement and they've got a lot of people on their books. But equally, you worry about that and just sort of making everything work. So that's one example there. And sometimes I look back at some of the tapes that I was asked to do. I remember one in lockdown. I was asked to do 9 scenes. Apparently I was shortlisted, but equally in COVID, there were lots of COVID backups in case somebody tested positive and so forth. But often this is something that you will kind of reflect on with your relationship with your agent. Is it worth having to do it? Does your agent have your back? Sometimes you might think, do you know what, it's really not worth it if they're asking for another stage. My show reel, my headshots, this should be enough. My resume of jobs that I've done before, they have an idea of what I'm going to be like. So they're just going to have to go with that. Otherwise, it's just not feasible. And feasible is one of my favorite words when navigating the freelancer space. I would love to do this, but I just don't think it's going to be feasible, because it's a polite way of saying it doesn't make the situation work for you. And I talked about the word diluting the phrase rather, diluting your fee offering, because you're kind of spinning that on them and saying, well, look, you are offering something by this, but do you realize that you're diluting this? And I want to be involved, but I'm just sort of trying to make this work in light of my situation. So, okay, that's one example. The second example relates to my compare work, and in particular my quiz hosting. Now, I used to have an event that I did on Thursdays, and Thursdays it's traditionally quite hard, I think, to get a quiz, because Thursdays become another kind of Friday night now for a lot of bars. Particularly in this kind of work from home culture. A lot of people work from home on Mondays and Fridays, so Thursdays in many senses becomes the kind of after office work night out. Anyway, I had a quiz night, and the manager lady, at times she was quite, we had a good rapport, but I think, like with a lot of people, she was quite sort of testing to deal with, and I don't think she quite understood what her requests were asking. Now, the fee that I charge is very much for the quiz that I deliver and the comparing. And granted, in her situation, I'm not going to name the bar, not going to name the manager again, because it's not about that. It's just to kind of show, an example that in my freelancer career, and something that I've navigated, and something that I've had to sort of know, where the line is, if you like. And you might be in a similar situation, and I hope that you'll be able to share your experience. But she was going through a difficult time with the company. She was contemplating whether she wanted to stay. I think she felt that maybe the company thought she was at the end of her tether as well. And something she had asked me to do was, she said, oh, look, I'm just the social media, because often I just will post pictures of the teams and that's it. Because I do that as a kind of, it's efficient sort of, I can take a picture, post that, and that's it. I think she kind of mentioned that she wanted more interesting graphics, like posters, like Canva posters. Now, when I take on a new venue, or I do a one-off venue sometimes, I will do a Canva poster, because I think it's great to kind of set the tone. And I very much see that as incorporated within the fee, especially when I start a new venue. However, for me to sit and do that every week, and I explained to her, especially at that time, I don't have a particularly prominent social media following. I very much encourage the venues to market the quiz, to tap into the local people. I didn't see, the quiz night being advertised sort of within the bar. I always think toilets are a good one to have posters up. Anyway, so I basically had to communicate with her and say, look, technically I could, even though I'm not a graphic designer, I could spend an afternoon, a few hours unpaid, and make posters for the upcoming weeks that I put on social media. But the problem with that is it's not something that I do for other clients. It's not something that's feasible for me to do with other clients. But equally, I don't think it's something that's going to give you a return, i.e. more people into the venue, because I don't have that following. And equally, the bar itself doesn't have that kind of following. Now, the bar itself was part of a chain, and there is a marketing department, and I felt like she could have encouraged them to do it rather than put the onus on me. If it was something that I felt was, I would get an exponential return from this, and I would get more incoming punters doing the quiz, and I would be like, great. But the problem was, and we had discussed this a few times, was she was sort of, really keen to encourage numbers, to see a return on the quiz. But equally, the layout of the venue is very limited, because it's very small when you walk in on the front bit, and then there's the side bit. And the sound equipment that she that I had only allowed me to use the front bit, or if I was in the side bit. So I was already going to be limited anyway, and it wasn't made easy for me to ask people to move. So I already had a capacity problem anyway. So I said, look, sometimes, and some venues are happy with this, it's very much going to be a case that I'm just sort of adding to the atmosphere in the bar. And often there'd be people that will sit and stay and watch the quiz and talk about it and have a bit of banter and things like that. And then even sort of ask me, oh, is that this? And so there's value being added in that way, and the fact that the quizzes seem to be doing events. But what I can't do is, especially there were these kind of old hat regular drinkers at the venue. Sorry, my voice is really nasally. I think my nose is quite runny. Perhaps a bit TMI. But anyway, there were these old hat drinkers at the venue who would just literally always be there. And it was very difficult for me to ask them to move. And I understood in her case, because they're regulars, they drink in there every day, and they must spend a fortune in there. So I get it. But then equally, it doesn't make sense for me to be making these posters, and I felt like it was something that she wanted to be seen to be doing from head office. So I had to kind of say, look, for me to do that unpaid for a few hours, I don't think that's going to be feasible. It's diluting the fee, and it's not going to be feasible, as I say, for me to be while I'm trying to run my business. I think equally I knew that quiz venue was going to be sort of at the end of its, coming to an end anyway. It wasn't really working. And the way I saw it is because equally liaising with her was quite difficult as well. So I just felt like it was time to move on. But I think those are two examples where you have to think about time. Incidentally, I've gone back occasionally and done like a one-off quiz because I think I was able to sort of keep a professional rapport, and the fact that I was asked back, I did appreciate that. And I think actually that works quite well for that venue, because you just do the odd one-off event rather than try to get this sort of repeat every week, which if you need to keep a certain type of clientele within your bar from week to week, and your space is limited where you can kind of put tables for the quiz and your sound equipment's limited, then that's what works. So those are two prime examples. I could go into more, but equally, hopefully you find that helpful. And thank you for listening. Do you have any stories yourself of anything that you've experienced where you felt like this was a real drain on your time? If so, do please share, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.